with some friends who a discussion with some friends who have done some really important work over the last year and a half. Well, I think they've always done important work, but it's been just what the role of government during something as big as a pandemic is just so essential. And so I am really looking forward to kicking the tires tonight and getting a much better sense about what really went on. With that, I am going to introduce our guests. We have with us Andrea Martinez Mejia, who is the Chief of Staff to the New Jersey Department of Health. Now, if you have seen Governor Murphy give his daily briefing, you know that he introduces her boss, Commissioner Judy Persicelli, as the woman who needs no introduction. And let me tell you, Andrea is also a woman who needs no introduction because she's had such a big impact on health in our communities. Before she was the Chief of Staff in Health for Commissioner Judy Persicelli, she served as the Coordinator of Community Health Services for the City of Trenton's Department of Health and Human Services. And she's held many positions in government, not only in DOH, but in the Governor's Office and the Office of the Secretary of State. Andrea has a BA in Political Science from Rutgers University, a master's degree in Public Administration, and a master's degree in Diplomacy and International Relations from Seton Hall University. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
I'm also happy to introduce Colleen Schultz-Escal. And I know Colleen for a super long time, and I've watched her career evolve, and I'm really proud of that. She is the COVID lead for the New Jersey Department of Education, which means she provides direction and guidance on all COVID-related issues. And she's a liaison with the Department of Health on all education-related issues. So this is going to be great as this unfolds tonight, because Andrea and Colleen are two women who have been holding up New Jersey education and health in this crisis. They've been working together pretty closely. Colleen's been at DOE since 2001. She's served in a whole bunch of different roles there, including Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Government Affairs. Before that, she worked for the New Jersey General Assembly in a research capacity. So she's been on the legislative side and the executive side, and the New Jersey Department of State. She has a BA in Political Science and a master's also from Rutgers University. And finally, my good friend and my councilman in my town, Mr. David Vander. David is the Executive Director of the Policy Office in the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Now, David, before going to the department, he was an organizer for SEIU 1199, and he was an attorney at a union-side labor and employment firm in Central Jersey. He's a graduate of the University of Virginia and Vanderbilt University School of Law. That is our illustrious panel tonight. So with that, let's dig right in. I want to talk about how the state of New Jersey dealt with the COVID crisis. Can we start out? Could you just share with me, what were some of the biggest challenges your agency faced during COVID? I mean, like, look, I know as a parent, the whole education thing was like a major thing dealing with, keeping everybody safe. I know as a parent, as a citizen of New Jersey, I was concerned about how do I protect myself, my family, my elderly parents, and obviously, and I had a million friends, who weren't employed during the pandemic, dealing with unemployment issues. And David was I was on the hotline with David all the time. So I can't imagine what it was like to live this day by day from your perspective. But could you give our audience here just a sense of what were the top issues, the biggest challenges that your agency faced during COVID-19? Why don't we start with Andrea?
Good evening, and thank you so much, Ginger, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight and share some of our experiences with your student body and with your friends and the folks out there that want to know a little bit more about how was those last 15 months for many of us here. From the Department of Health, among the challenges, obviously, we first dealt with the unknown. Now, we were tracking this virus since it first started. We started hearing about it at towards the end of December and January, and we were monitoring it closely. But it really, as the things began to unfold in the state, it really was how we're going to respond, what is going to be, and a lot of it, the unknowns of what this virus was going to look like and how it's going to affect New Jersey. Little that we know that we're going to become the epicenter of this pandemic. And then it was obviously the ability to respond because we have to ensure that 9 million people in New Jersey were safe, but also how is our operations, our day-to-day business continuity. And like many of you, we have, parents, and we have folks that had to take care of their families and also have to respond to this pandemic. So the balance between being there 24/7 at the department and taking care of our families and the unknown were one of the biggest challenges we had as we faced this novel virus. We have our team that are experts and familiarized, but it was the day-to-day as we were learning day by day, hour by hour almost, of how this pandemic was unfolding in front of our eyes.
Excellent. Gosh. And I mean, like, could you say anything, like, was it all about like trying to get PPE places? Was it about, tell me about what it looked like between the Department of Health and, let's say, the governor's office on these matters?
Yeah, so we started to look into, as I said, we started to follow up and they start meeting on a daily basis. Some from the from back in January, and we didn't have any cases, and we really were just tracking what was happening in Wuhan, China, and then everything sort of changed when Super Bowl Sunday, when we were informed that New Jersey was going to be one of the EWR was going to be one of the funnel airports, and there were folks traveling back from China. We're going to arrive in a matter of hours into our state, and we have to plan for quarantining and isolation for those individuals. So working very closely with the governor's office and other partners, we had to work with our transportation partners and the airports to ensure that we had all the necessary resources for the response. And then as things continued to evolve, it got into the needs that we had. We saw that it was a virus that it was going to be heavily, the front line of this battle was going to be at the hospital and the hospital basis, and working with our partners at the hospital association and ensuring that we had enough beds and that we had enough resources for them. And at that time, it was the scarcity. So it was looking and trying to identify who needed what resources were available, and trying to work and allocate as much as resources as we can to those that were needed. And also it was really the scarcity of it. It was moving, literally we were moving ventilators in the middle of the night, and we were monitoring closely in terms of the number of beds in our hospitals, because obviously the fear that we had was that at some point we are going to be overwhelmed, that our health system was going to be overwhelmed, we're going to be running out of beds. And we start working and looking at how expand that capacity. And we had, we have seen the pictures of our hospitals turning their cafeterias into putting beds into their cafeterias. And, something that we didn't expect there was, we had to put up 3 field medical hospitals, something that we haven't done, and our staff has never put hospitals in the past. So in collaboration with our partners at the federal level, and working with our and taking the experience of our commissioner, who has been a hospital executive for many years, we were able to stood up 3 field medical hospitals. And luckily, we never had that point in terms of running out of beds, and our field medical hospitals did provide a lot of needed bed space, so people can be taken care of in critical units at the hospitals, and those who have lesser needs, medical needs, were able to be taken care of the field medical hospitals.
I imagine you didn't think about that when you took this job. So, Colleen,
no.
I've kind of got an order here, right? So, so the virus is, we're tracking it. It happened. Department of Health, you're paying attention to what it happens. That's going to happen, right? And thinking about beds in hospitals and ventilators. But then, like, so you're talking about 9 million people. And then there's like, what, Colleen, like 1.4 million children in public schools. So all of a sudden it hits, and schools now have to keep everybody safe and keep educating people.
Yeah.
Colleen, tell me about DOE, because I think that's kind of what happened next in this chain of events. Like, what
Yeah.
did you face?
Thanks, Ginger. And again, just echoing sentiments of Andrea, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And even building off of what Andrea shared, that real-time communication developed really in the space of the coronavirus task force through executive order from Governor Murphy, really brought all of government together at the table from the very beginning. And so we were there with the Department of Health tracking those numbers and hearing it and knowing, pretty much the writing is on the wall that this virus is going to enter New Jersey. And so thinking about it from the school perspective, we knew, early on that our first case was going to be in North Jersey and in Bergen County in a school. And that was our first really foray into having to handle this. And so we worked really closely with the Department of Health from the get-go to help manage those situations as they were evolving in real time. And I would say as far as our biggest challenges, it was really taking a system of education, one to address a health issue, which, superintendents generally really are not experts in a health crisis, and really fast forwarding and supporting them from the department's perspective to handle this and navigate this pandemic as it was evolving in real time. So just taking a traditional brick and mortar system, and as we transitioned, on a rolling basis at first, and then the entire state to a virtual platform was a monumental task of us all working together. We engaged with stakeholders immediately, bringing superintendents together. I know, Andrea, you were with us on some of those early stakeholder calls, and Commissioner Persicelli was as well, to really be in constant communication with updates of as things in this virus was tracking. One other piece that was really pivotal to our initial response was addressing food insecurity. And I think we need to step back and think about that school is just not school. It's not just education. It is a support system for families to access food, to access services, thinking about our special education population and beyond that. I'm really taking and approaching that supportive role that schools play. They're also childcare. And we know that intuitively, but we didn't really have to think about that in unique ways like we did in the pandemic. So, addressing food insecurity very early on, engaging with our Department of Agriculture, setting up opportunities for technical assistance with our Division of School Safety as districts moved to a virtual setting, but still providing access to food for families and supporting that delivery of food in a healthy and safe way. So we did hundreds of visits to districts on site to support those efforts, just to be there, just to help. Our staff was all over the state, really fanning out to support districts as they were, trying to continue to support families. And it doesn't go without saying, as we moved to a virtual platform, there were several students, several thousand students in the beginning of this pandemic who did not have a device and did not have access to technology. So we did as much coordination as we could with our county office staff, with our own divisions within the department to try to connect families. I think we can all say we'd like it to happen faster, but we really did a yeoman's job of really lifting up and addressing those needs that existed, and in trying to close the digital divide. We opened up grants later in the school year last year to try to help support districts. But it was definitely, I would say, food insecurity, the digital divide, and then just taking a system that wasn't traditionally built for a virtual setting into the virtual world.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'm really glad you made that point, because so many people think of schools as just being a place where their children go to be educated, but they don't think about the food insecurity or the child care aspects, and that child care allows, when children are at school, it allows moms and dads to go to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and speaking of going to work, it's a perfect segue, David, so the pandemic's here, and all of a sudden businesses are forced to close, and people are losing their jobs and unemployment is surging. Talk to me about the Department of Labor. Like, what were the biggest challenges that the department faced in trying to deal with the kind of adversity that New Jersey's workers were facing?
Sure. Well, thank you, Ginger, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's great to be with everybody tonight. Yeah, unemployment was the defining challenge that we had, obviously, during the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we were at the lowest recorded unemployment rate, I believe, as long as they were keeping records in the state, something around like 3% unemployment. And the department was seeing about 5,000 unemployment claims per week. And then the pandemic hits, and then at the end of March 2020, beginning of April 2020, that was our largest period, we were seeing about 200,000 claims per week. So a 40-fold increase in the number of New Jersey residents that were filing claims. And the unemployment rate, which was, as I said, about 3% in February of 2020, ended up, I think, topping out around 17%. So just an absolutely gigantic explosion in the number of people that were filing claims. And then, so that led to an immediate challenge in terms of getting the department into remote work, so that our claims examiners could, set up a call system so that our claims examiners could receive calls, and then just the basic logistical challenges of getting everybody laptops and making sure that they're all connected to the network. In the early days, I remember hearing the commissioner, going from Best Buy to Best Buy with his credit card and just picking up whatever laptops he could find, and to distribute them to our staff here. So that was the biggest challenge. And in addition to just the unemployment claims, we were also dealing with a number of congressional programs that were passed into law to supplement unemployment and to ameliorate the effects of the pandemic. But one program in particular was, and this might go in a little bit into the weeds, but in addition to regular unemployment, there was this program called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, which is an unemployment-like claim, but it was specifically for individuals that are not normally eligible for unemployment. And now the department had to gather information about all of those tens of thousands of additional claimants, in addition to dealing with the gigantic increase in regular filers, in addition to, as I said, setting up remote work and those sorts of things, hiring additional staff. But we were also administering some of the sick leave programs that were authorized by the state legislature and also by the federal government. So that was another feature of the early pandemic, was that the federal government passed a series of laws that dramatically expanded the amount of earned sick leave that people could take and use it to receive treatment for the pandemic. So we were enforcing or jointly enforcing with the United States Department of Labor those programs as well. But clearly the unemployment crisis was the largest thing by far, and it's still an issue that we're dealing with to this day, and so I would say that is the largest challenge that we had to face.
That's a huge challenge. And, this is just among the three of you. This is such a great look at what public administrators do. Like, you think about someone working in the Department of Labor or Health or Education, and Colleen's over in education. and you're suddenly dealing with internet and connectivity and food insecurity. Andrea's staff is like monitoring a virus an ocean away and thinking about what do we do when people arrive in an airport. David's going from 5,000 claims to like fourfold, like 100,000. I mean, you know, and having programs come from all different levels of government, federal, state, local, you know, it's all so interconnected, and it just speaks to what administrators have to do. It just, now that everybody has a little picture about it, Liz, would you mind putting up that first poll question? I didn't want to ask this too soon because I think that everyone kind of needs to hear a little bit about what, like, the rest of the story before answering it. So Liz, can you put up that first question? I hear a check, she is. And while she does that, you know, what did your colleagues do? Now we know what the challenges were. Briefly tell me, like, what are some of the things you and your colleagues had to do to actually meet those challenges? And you could go in any order. And somebody got a good story for me about, like, what did you do to go into a virtual platform for our public schools? What did you do to make sure that our healthcare system didn't get overwhelmed? Anyone want to tell me, like, if there's something special that happened in your department?
Well, I wouldn't mind going first with the indulgence of my co-panelists here, but you know, the thing about the unemployment system is that so many New Jersey residents were just unfamiliar with it, that they had you know, that they had never really filed for unemployment before, or if they encountered some kind of problem, then it could be quickly resolved through a phone call or some other fairly not time intensive process. So we really had to educate and orient our residents to the basics of the claiming process. So we had to create some very basic guidance documents, some very basic instructional videos that told people how to file and you know, how to answer the questions that we ask in order to claim benefits. So I think that was a really important part of the early pandemic, and I was glad to participate in that, just because, as I said, a lot of people were just so unfamiliar with the concept and with the kind of terminology that unemployment involves.
It was an education piece, really. Like, you know, the system's always been here, but suddenly you have to educate people how to use it because they may never have encountered it, or it's like the last thing on their mind, right? They just know they need benefits and they've heard from news and everything they can access them. Mm-hmm. You're sort of communicating, educating, and guiding them through that process.
That's absolutely right.
Excellent. Colleen or Andrea?
Yeah, I can add, Andrea, unless you want to chime in first.
Well, sure. In terms of the field medical hospitals, right? Department of Health, we're not known to run hospitals on a daily basis. That's not our function. We regulate them, but we don't have our own hospitals. So I really gone into action and said, okay, how we're going to do these, and really just tasking some of our staff and said, okay, well, now you're going to have to go and identify places and look at locations where we're going to set up these hospitals and what other resources we need. So it really was something that when we look back and said, you know, we just sprint into action and just literally we're looking for places where we're going to set up these hospitals, how we're going to do it, and how to procure the resources needed for these hospitals. And also we had to get a whole new workforce. We had to get doctors and nurses and that can come in and provide that service. So we were now, next thing you know, we were setting up a whole HR system to identify volunteers. We had to set up a whole, open up a portal where people can volunteer and we have to onboard them. And, next, we were running, hospitals in the North, Central, and South parts of New Jersey.
And you need to find people qualified to onboard them, right? I mean,
Yes, yeah, and also understanding we were competing with the hospitals, right? So all our hospitals were looking for nurses and doctors that can come into their facilities, because we were having our doctors and nurses were they getting sick. They were, they themselves were getting sick, and they were put out for medical leave. So that was something that I said to this day. People said if they would tell us we would have to put up these hospitals, we would have said no way, because it's different. And even for the with the federal partners, we had some of the Army Corps of Engineers were here to help us, and even some of those service members will tell you they were familiar to setting up hospitals in the middle of the desert, but very different to set up hospitals in an urban setting like New Jersey, or places like New Jersey. So that was one of the, but we had to do it. That was the only way to ensure that we can help decant some of those hospitals and open up for more hospitals beds. And we did it. I said we opened them up, and we took care of 500 people at each of those hospitals.
Amazing. You know what? I'm really glad to see while we were speaking, the Liz put up the results of the poll, and I think 60 some odd percent, right? Most people felt better and about public servants, and it really, made people respect public servants more because of this pandemic, which is a great outcome when people like you guys, the staffs, work so hard. Colleen, what happened in Ed?
Yeah, just thinking back, I would say when we were having those very early conversations, especially with our superintendents, because they were really sort of on the ground giving us real-time information and navigating us. I think that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest takeaways for me of this whole experience is really listening and learning from those who are in the field and shifting as necessary. But I would just say, as you know, Ginger, the education community is really guided by statutes and regulations. And from the very beginning, leadership were asking us for flexibilities. So we had the opportunity to provide, through emergency regulations, a series of flexibilities, especially when it came to the delivery of instruction. And that was just so important at the very beginning. And it may sound small, but it was something very big in the practice of delivery of education at the time. And so, that looked very different as we came to the start of this school year. But at the time, those flexibilities gave solace to leaders in districts who, all they wanted to do was support their families. And so that allowed them to do that. And I would just, revisit something I brought up earlier. The other piece I'm really proud of is our support of districts as they continue to provide food to families, and ensuring that our communication with the Department of Agriculture and that smooth delivery of information, not only from the USDA at the time, because they were allowing for a lot of flexibilities to really feed everybody, because this pandemic, knows no zip code, knows no, socioeconomic status. And so it was really important for us to support districts as they continue to feed families. So I would say that's something I'm really proud of.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And, one of the questions that I had for this panel tonight was to talk about how did you coordinate with other parts of state government or with other levels of government, including federal or local governments like school districts, or with stakeholders to accomplish shared objectives. I noticed that you've addressed a lot of that in your comments.
Yeah. I'm sure my other colleagues feel the same way. I don't think we could have gotten through the pandemic without each other, and not only Department of Labor, but Department of Health and all departments really together, because even working with DCF and DHS, we worked on childcare because of the connector to our pre-K programs and licensing, and when we thought about summer camp last year. So we couldn't have done and supported those populations without us all working together. And I hope that is another takeaway from the pandemic. I think there was some element of working together before COVID, but it really reinforced the need for that continued partnership across agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I just finished just last week teaching a class, Intro to Public Administration. That's one of the things I get to do as director of the program. And we had a whole unit on intergovernmental relations. And, you know, it's such a big picture to look at, because you think of government as one thing, and it's so many different kinds of governments. And often as citizens, we say one doesn't know what the other one's doing. And here you have like this major life and death kind of event, to see that, you know, just listening to you, to hear about how you've all had to work together. How do you maintain, like, what's the secret sauce? How do you maintain relationships and build relationships with other levels of government? I mean, did that happen just because of the pandemic, or are you like, do you always work together, and were you relying on that to get through a crisis?
I think on that was a combination of both, because I think a lot of us, each department has a set of stakeholders. In our case, we were working, you know, we work with the hospital systems. They are our, we license them, we regulate them, and we're in constant communication. And at the local level, we have a local health departments, and we always connect them with them. And they are the, you know, the forefront of any, whenever we have a communicable disease, they are the ones who conduct investigations. So they are our boots on the ground when it comes to infectious diseases. But what this pandemic did is that we also had to communicate even more with those stakeholders, and really sort of be shoulder to shoulder in the fight. And it relied on more communication with them. We were in constant communication with multiple stakeholders many times a day, and also conveying some of that information and connecting them with other with areas. I mean, Colleen is shaking her hand because she had to work with her local health department. So we were making sure that those connections were happening at the local level, and that any recommendation, any guidance that was coming from the state was also communicated, and we were connecting. And same with her department. We have to connect with some of those superintendents and the school nurses, and they were our liaisons. So really, when you look at it in terms of the connectivity, we were communicating with our own stakeholders, but also we have to communicate with stakeholders across the department, across government. And on that, we relied on the relationships that we have with all the agencies. One of the other things that we had throughout this pandemic is the governor and the coronavirus task force, where we have all the different departments coming together on a weekly basis to learn, to hear. We will talk about, we'll provide updates, and we also will say what every department needed and how we can help each other. And that was the best way to continue the connectivity and the communication among all the different agencies. And believe it or not,
all via Zoom, right? Andrea, that was all via Zoom?
At the beginning, we were still meeting in the office until everything got shut down. And then, yes, we had to move to Zoom and, teleconference. And we've been doing that ever since. But at the beginning we were, and then we missed that. I think that was some of the things that now things are getting a little bit better, and you might be able to see some folks. I think we also missed that the ability to see each other and talk and just to see what's going on. But yeah, we went from, we also had to adapt into that. We were meeting on a daily basis, and, we were like the first, if you remember the first press conferences, Colleen and I used to see each other every day because we were all there in those press rooms until everything shut down. And now we can see it is all done via Zoom, and, with all the safeguards needed.
Wow, interesting.
And
David,
if I could, so I think one aspect of coordinating relationships with other levels of government may also involve recognizing when some of the guidance or coordination doesn't square with your objectives. So the unemployment program is largely set by federal government rules, and as we were over the course of the pandemic, as we were getting guidance from the U.S. Department of Labor and even to the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, we had to think about whether that squared with our own objectives here in the state. And we did disagree with them at several points in the pandemic, and we had to go our own way. So I think that it's very important to maintain those relationships and to learn, but you also have to be cognizant of when that relationship may be harmful to your own objectives.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Relationships aren't just something that you do because it's friendly, right? Relationships become strategic partnerships, and you also have to learn how to filter information. Is that what I'm getting? Is that true, David, from your standpoint?
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. That it's more than just hanging out on Zoom together. That it's exchanging information, but sometimes it didn't. The guidance and advice that we were getting just did not comport with some of the things that we were trying to do here.
I tell you that, and that's something that one of the things that we do in our master's program is we have a course in executive communication, we have a course in conflict management, and we try to reinforce that, when you're training the next generation of public leaders, you need to make sure that they know how to ask great questions and to listen with intention, filter information, and use it to make strong policy decisions. And obviously that's work that all of you've had to do. And, speaking of how and by the way, Liz, do we have a result? I know that you put up a poll and it was, what effect has this crisis had on your level of interest? And I think most people on the poll, 75% of them are actually more interested in these careers because you get to work on some really thorny problems that make a difference in people's lives. With that, I want to shift gears a little with this panel. So you're still going through it, right? But you've been through a lot in the last year and a quarter, almost year and a half. Tell me, what lessons about public service have you learned while serving during a pandemic? Who wants to go first on that? Nobody wants to go first.
I can chime in.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, I think it's just being present, right? Being there. Andrea spoke about, being there and to be, in conversations with stakeholders, showing up and, really not backing down from the challenge was, a huge lesson. This was, something that took us all out of our comfort zone. And, even when we didn't have the answers, we would do everything in our power. And that did mean sometimes, working with our cross-agency partners. And sometimes we didn't have answers, and that was okay at the time, but we did our best to be there. So I would just say being present was one of the lessons, and sometimes just picking up the phone, whatever hour it was really impactful for individuals, no matter where they were in this pandemic was really important for us. And I think it helped us maintain a level of, open communication with our stakeholders to be able to make better policy.
Yeah, Andrea, what is there something particular that you learned from this?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, especially I will say for those coming into public administration, is the ability to be agile and be able to pivot, because that is something that you don't find a lot in government. A lot of the stuff that has happened in government you will find it is very a little bit stagnant, and some of the processes that we have to encounter, they're based on some rules and regulations that have been for years. And so it's very, in sometimes, especially in a pandemic, it lacked the agility, and it really take from us to just get creative and be agile and be able to respond at the moment and just pivot a lot, because that's what we did, especially when we didn't have a lot of the answers, or when, the information was changing on an hourly basis. So one of the things that, we'll take with us, a lot of it is it kind of help you, and it pushes us to change our train of thought and how we're looking at problems. So I will say it really challenged us all, and I made us more agile, and also to the ability to realize when to pivot.
So so Colleen said, be present, and Andrea says, be agile, and everybody's like, be ready to, and communication is key. Be willing to move out of your comfort zone. I feel like we're getting some good lessons here. David, do you want to add to that list?
Sure. This is, I think, similar to Andrea's point, but you have to lead, right? That you were put in office to lead, and that you shouldn't be afraid of disagreeing with, several times we got one recommendation from our career staff, and we determined that was not the right course of action, and so we went in another way. But you can't be scared. You can't be scared of that, and you just have to be smart about it, but you shouldn't be scared to lead, as long as your leadership is towards a valuable, and that's in the public interest. So that's one thing that I certainly have thought a lot about, and I don't regret any time that we decided to go a different way from some of the advice that we're getting, because it was all in the public interest.
Yeah, I imagine there's just a lot of noise, right? When there's big stuff, everybody has an opinion. It most of the time comes from the right place, but reasonable minds can differ at times like these. And you, as a leader, like David said, you have to lead. You have to be able to take your shot at it, and it may, there's no one right way. Which Liz, I'm really curious about this audience, what interest they might have in each of these policy areas. Can you put up the poll while I ask another question? So team, talk to me for a moment. What was it about your own education and experiences that prepared you for this moment? I mean, you all have some different background, right? I mean, Andrea has, public administration, but also international relations, right? David's a lawyer. Colleen has an MPA from Rutgers. Tell me about, but Andrea's worked in the local level in Trenton, and she spent time in the state. David was in a union and a private sector law firm. Colleen's worked on the legislative side, the executive side. Obviously, you make decisions and filter information based on your experiences and your training. What was it about your training and experiences that you pulled from the most that prepared you for this particular moment of leadership?
So I will say that a lot of this stuff come together when you're in this moment. So part of my experience had been also done multiple political campaigns. And when I had to describe to folks and I had to say, I need help. And, I had to relate what this looks like, this response or this piece that we're doing. I will tell them it's like a political campaign. It's crazy. And the only difference between that and what we're doing is we don't have an end date. With a political campaign, it's crazy. You look towards election day and that is, for good or for bad, is the end of it. This one doesn't. And that's how it felt. The quickness, the agility that you needed, the unknowns, and how quickly you have to act and react to things. It was like a political campaign. So I draw a lot of that experience from those years of doing political campaigning. And then also working at the local level and understanding what the local health departments look like, how they are, how they operate on a daily basis, and what this meant to a lot of them. And just being able to bring that voice. And every time we were trying to make a decision and just bring that in, is thinking of from their, from their eyes as well. That's important because, sometimes, especially at the state level, we get to dictate a lot of policy. We get to dictate a lot, but sometimes we're not on the other side of the street, right? We're not at the local level, what it means to implement those guidance and those policies with the people that are closest to. So I draw a lot into that as well. And a lot of it is just the relationships. I can't emphasize enough working when you're working on disasters and when you're working and responding to something big, you rely on your relationships, your friendships, the people that you know, the people that you have worked with, and that you know that they might be able to do this type of job. I mean, not only we were responding to this pandemic, but also we were looking for people that can come and help. And it's just going into your background and who you have worked with and who can be a right fit, a good fit for helping you on these battles. So you bring it, to me, it bring all together. I said, it came back from when, political campaigning to what has been on the ground, and also working with the community, being able to be there, knowing how some communities respond differently, being able to, knowing the difference between urban communities and vulnerable communities, being able to use my my language, I'm bilingual, being able to express, we work in labor, we work with the migrant workers. That was a huge thing last summer. They were coming and we had to keep them safe. And I have to say, we did a really good work between agriculture and labor. We come out with some really good recommendations and trying to keep a very vulnerable community safe as possible. And talk about in terms of who was overseeing that, we realized that we didn't have authority over a lot of them. It was Department of Health didn't have much authority, labor didn't, neither did agriculture, but the three departments worked together. And I have to say, one of the really good projects that we did was keep that population, good recommendations, keep them safe, and they were able to work. And our farmers were able to have their season. So just bring all of them came together in the end.
There's so much to unpack about what you just said, Andrea. But something that I always tell our students is that the best that political experience is free, and working on a campaign is the best way to learn so much, because it's a short sprint, and it's like you figure out your crisis communication, how to set it up. You're asked to stretch and do things that you might not ordinarily do. It's a wonderful training, not only for the relationships to help find jobs, but it's a great training ground for government. And thank you. And there was a lot of other things I'd like to unpack, but I want to give everyone a chance. But first, I also want to see this poll. So it looks like most people on this call are interested in education policy, a couple in labor policy. I'm sorry, Andrea, no one's, after hearing what you had to do to set up 3 field hospitals, everybody's like, I'm not doing health.
We do need a workforce in public health. So I hope somebody, I hope I can change some hearts at the end of this panel.
I tell you what, Andrea, when we're back in person, you come to Campus Live, I want you to be recruiting for health, because
I will.
It's important we have people like you who are willing to do this work. So anyway, David, what about your experiences prepared you for this moment?
So I think that, as Andrea said, I think the relationships that I had coming into this work and that we've maintained during this work were very important. So in particular, I worked in the legislature for a number of years, and it was so important that as we're going through this incredibly difficult period, and the legislature is doing so much to try and offer relief, it was very important that they trusted the department and the department's leadership to give people the benefit of the doubt and administer these programs, with a generous spirit. And so the relationships that I had, that other members of our senior leadership had in the legislature, having worked in the state for a number of years, I think was incredibly important. And the same is true with respect to our relationships with a lot of the state's labor unions and advocacy groups. Again, these were areas that these were organizations that I had a lot of familiarity with, as well as the department's leadership. So there was trust there. They knew that they could get a fair deal from us, and that we would again, give people the benefit of the doubt and interpret programs as generously as we could. And I just think that was so important, so necessary, that there was that trust.
Trust. I love that. It's a great message. By the way, I know time is running short. We're going to be off in a few minutes, but I think I've been asking so many questions. I failed to ask if the audience had any questions. If there's any audience questions, you can please put them in the chat because I could go on forever with my friends.
I think we have a couple of them now. You can answer them. I mean, you could go over them now, or we could go over them at the end, whenever you'd like. There's about 4
Sure.
questions.
Liz, why don't we take a question from the audience now?
Sure. I'll read the first one. Do you think cyber school and virtual classrooms will become more of the norm in New Jersey once the pandemic is over? Is this the beginning of the end for brick and mortar schools?
Oh, Colleen, that must be for you, I'm guessing.
Sounds like it. So I think, right now operating, we have a lot of flexibilities right now because of the things that I already mentioned through executive order. And, there's a lot of, once the, sort of health emergency is over, those, emergency regulations are no longer in place. So a lot of those, we've been getting a lot of those questions, and, is this a point in education where they can ignite some areas of change or opportunity. However, a lot of that's going to have to be driven by the legislature. As the executive branch, we can only work within the parameters of the current statutes and regulations that, are in place at this time. So I think it remains to be seen, right? TBD, let's see where we go. We've certainly learned a lot. And, there's, definitely things I think we can take with us forward, for sure. And I think, what we see in the future will only have better outcomes for kids. But right now, as far as, an entirely online platform or a virtual school cyber setting, I think it's too early to say.
So Liz, do you have anything else there, or can I ask a question?
There's actually a couple. Brandon asked, what kinds of policies and programs will the Department of Labor implement to help get people back to work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we've recovered a fair amount from the roughly 17% unemployment that was at the height. I think that was in the summer of last year, and so you're seeing to some extent like a natural recovery. And I think as more and more people get vaccinated, as the pandemic, these cautionary measures are being relaxed, I think you're going to see further improvement in the unemployment rate. Our claim numbers are dramatically below where they were, which is an encouraging direction. But the department is it's reopening a lot of its workforce assistance programs and job training programs. So that's going to be, I think, increasingly salient as these programs, once again, which are very important to getting people into good jobs, that they ramp up again. But I think probably the vast majority of it is just going to come from people getting vaccinated and businesses looking to rehire, and I think that'll be by far the vast majority of how that will be ameliorated.
Thanks, David. So Liz, can we put up a poll question, and then I want to have a speed round with my panel as we're getting to the very end of this. Panelists, can I do a speed round? So, and here's the question, and Liz can put up the poll so that you can think about it a second while I ask. What advice do you have for future public administrators? So there are people on this call that are either in my program right now that are going to be going out into the world either this year or next year. And there are folks who are thinking about entering a public administration program on the call. So what advice do you have for future public administrators? And Liz has a poll question up too. Who wants to take that first?
I will say right now, if you want to enter any work in government or public administration, is a good opportunity because we are looking for folks to work in the pandemic. So whether you want to volunteer, whether you want to intern, or whether you're looking for some type of employment in government and just want to get a taste of what it is to be in public administration, I think this is an opportunity that you should be seeking and just learning from, from the ground and what it looks like. And hopefully, but a pandemic doesn't happen every time. So the ability to gain some experience in the middle of the pandemic, I think, is priceless. So I encourage all of you to look and seek some opportunities, whether it's volunteering, interning, or looking for some jobs.
Thank you. I love that practical experience. Colleen.
Yeah, I definitely would agree, and always looking for individuals who want to serve. I would just, continue to say that it will give you the opportunity to work with a diverse set of individuals and stakeholders, and really, touch a lot of things that may seem mysterious, perhaps, but really have the opportunity to impact the lives of New Jerseyans. So I've, been humbled to be at the department for 20 years, which is, was not my original intention. I never thought I would be here as long as I am, but it really had afforded me a lot of opportunities to grow as a professional, which you typically don't hear or think of perhaps with public service, but there's really a chance to grow your own within a lot of our agencies, and there is opportunity if you seek it out. So I would just say consider it. And, always, there's definitely a diverse set of experiences out there that, need to infuse some young employees into state government for sure.
And David, you have the final word on this, but also I want to know if somebody will also answer a friend's question. Where do you recommend is a good place to look for vacancies, like vacancies in state government?
There's two places for us. I mean, we in our website on Department of Health, we are advertising the vacancies, but also the Civil Service Commission. They also have all the vacancies for all the departments, and also they post for whether it's local, county, or state level. So those two places will be good places to are. And also, you have LinkedIn. I mean, there's a lot of folks that have reached out to me through LinkedIn, and we have a LinkedIn page. So those are good places to look at what vacancies are and just seek some opportunities.
Excellent. Thanks for that. David, that's perfect answer, actually. David, can you bring us home about what advice you have for future public administrators?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Andrea and Colleen said, but as I said before, you have to lead, you have to be bold. That's what it's all about. That's in a large sense why we're here. So don't be afraid to take a risk. And I would just add one thing, in addition to the Civil Service Commission website that Andrea mentioned. Also, a lot of these departments offer paid internships in the summer. I think we're actually still looking for paid interns. If anyone wants to send me an email. But yeah, there are opportunities in state government, and I am delighted in working in state government, and it's really just incredibly rewarding work.
Ladies and gentlemen, panelists, Andrea and David and Colleen, thank you so much for this hour and for kind of giving us a behind the scenes look at what it is to be in government during a major pandemic. To Liz, Ben, Christy, thanks for being here and putting together the event. To Liz, can I turn it to you?
Yes, but there's actually one more question.
Sorry.
I'll just keep it to the one last question from Brian Solander. I think I said that name correctly.
Sure.
What heroes? Thank you for all you do and did. How do we keep moving forward with vaccination adoptions so we don't face mutations that set us back? Thanks again for your service and for the school for setting this up. You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Brian, for your question. You want to take a
Thank
stab at
you.
Brian's question?
And I will say, and thank you, Brian, for bringing up vaccination. We have to get that 70%. And that is as we are. I have to say, we are really, really close. We have vaccinated over 8 million people. The 70% of 9.2 million people that are now in New Jersey, we got the census numbers a few weeks ago, so we had to update it. Our goal is roughly 5 million people. And we have said over 8 million people have been vaccinated at least one dose. Out of those, 3.9 million have completed their doses. So that means if you got Pfizer or Moderna, you got 2 doses. If you got J&J, like I did, is 1 shot and done. So we're less than 1 million people. If we can get that, and hopefully we can surpass it. The more people that is vaccinated, the closer we will get to our community protection, or herd immunity, and that's what's going to get us back into our new normal. So I encourage all of you who have yet to get your vaccine, go and seek out. We have 1,200 points of vaccination throughout the state. There's plenty of appointments right now. So, I encourage you to really consider and get your vaccine and help us get that 70% before June 30th. We really appreciate it because we're really this close.
Yeah. I got my J&J, and my daughter got my teenager was finally able to get hers a couple weeks ago. So.
And for those college students too, I want to remind them, a lot of schools are putting mandates for vaccine. So you don't want to wait until August to get your vaccine. Remember, if you get Pfizer or Moderna, you have to wait between 3 and 4 weeks to get your second dose. So do it now that, people are not thinking about that, or, be first in line and get your vaccine.
That's excellent advice. Well, once again, friends, thank you so much for this. St. Peter's University is honored to be able to train future leaders to do this work. And honestly, the best way to learn how to do this work is through example. And you provide us tonight with wonderful examples of what public service is about and what leaders do and decisions they make. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Liz?
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us, panelists, program directors, Office of Graduate Admissions staff. This was super interesting. I'm actually a Master of Public Administration student, so I stand by y'all. So I definitely advocate for the program very strongly. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, for sacrificing your time. We know everyone has such busy schedules. If we will be following up with all of our attendees with some emails in case you have any other questions that you'd prefer to address privately. We did have the anonymous questions, of course, but there's always that one-on-one attention that we're always willing to give. So thank you everyone again. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with any attendees who were here. In the form of an application or an email or a phone call. We're always here. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.